watch the Reality Awaits review. Let's watch that. Let's watch that.
Oh my god.
I've already seen this. He does auto-tune the entire time for the review. Anyway.
Oh my god. Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Strokes album, Reality Awaits. Here we have the newest and 7th full-length LP from legendary New York indie veterans, The Strokes. A band that, honestly, has it all. Classic records and songs that have sold millions, an influential sound, an Italian drummer, and also a large and impassioned fan base that has ridden with the band through multiple eras, hiatuses, side projects, solo efforts, harebrained experiments, and everything in between. And the Strokes have also proven to have something many of their aughties indie contemporaries haven't, and that is longevity. Because while the band's catalog has certainly had its share of highs and lows, many would argue their last album, The New Abnormal, is handily one of their best, and came over 20 years after their debut record. It was a daring and fun album produced by the one and only Rick Rubin, and this one really saw the band going off the rails, challenging fans with longer songs, some synth pop and new wave influences, messy mixes, and some chaotic psychedelic layers too. And with all of that, the band was somehow still nailing it with one of their best crops of songs in years. And for people who have been waiting for the band to drop something at least on the level of Room on Fire, this album was cause for celebration. Not only were the Strokes back, but they were back in rare form. But the period immediately following this record wasn't nearly as focused or as permanent as many had hoped for. News of another album was nowhere in sight. Meanwhile, various members respectively retreated into their own creative outlets. Albert Hammond Jr. put out some solo work in 2024, which was the same year that Julian reconvened with his other band, The Voids, and did so with a strange album that left a sour taste in many fans' mouths, like All Before You, whose release was maybe doomed from the start due to the album cover, I guess, being AI generated, but
I really hate that album cover is AI generated because it's so cool. That is like the best thing any generative AI has ever made. I don't know what's like the giveaway. What's the giveaway here that it's AI generated? Or yeah, this is AI generated, and then it's so weird that Julian has like a dig at AI, and I think it's one of the last songs in Reality Awaits, when a lot of the advertising for had to be generated and then edited somehow. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But they release like AI trailers for the Reality Awaits albums. And I'm like, you can't really like talk shit about AI and then use it for your album advertising, you know? Like, damn, dude. Let's keep playing this. But so far he's just yeah, irony. I don't know. He's just giving us some background information I can't really disagree with much yet, or agree, or also him doing the autotune is funny as fuck. I didn't know that. Yeah, it's kind of funny.
the music itself wasn't helping either, as the production and performances on this one felt very isolated in comparison with previous Voids albums. It was almost as if Julian had conceived and tracked this one all on his own, with many of the songs having not only a demo quality presentation, but also weak songwriting on nearly every track, and some heavy-handed use of auto-tune as well. I mean, not only was this a step down from everything the Voids had had been up until this point, but also anything Julian had ever done solo or otherwise. However, with that being said, the Voids and the Strokes are very different bands, that is true. Still, it's a band whose trajectory is difficult to ignore in this context, especially since historically Julian is bad at compartmentalizing random artistic urges, because what creative juices tend to be flowing into orbiting creative outlets are typically likely to make it onto any number of Strokes tracks as well. And, you know, given how great the new Abnormal came out, that's not innately a bad thing. But with that being said, I was wondering what state this album would be delivered in once its backstory was laid out, as the Strokes once again are working with Rick Rubin on this one. Apparently had some initial sessions in Costa Rica laying this album down, and then apparently pieced the rest of it together by essentially recording other bits and odds and ends in random places, random times. Eventually, we began to get initial singles like Going Shopping, which honestly had a lot to like between its dancey drums and slick rhythm guitars. Julian's lyrics on this one are
You
pretty on
know,
point too.
I
The
was
whole thing
talking
kind of boils
to texting someone, and like they were asking me about the album, what I thought about it, and I think eventually it came up that I was just thinking about going shopping, right? And the comparisons between this and Is This It? Um, I think I think Going Shopping is the only song that sounds like Is This It? But it's just like Is This It with autotune. But they were saying um that they think there was another song they mentioned. They mentioned another song that they think it sounds like Is This It more than Going Shopping. And I'm like, see, the fact that we can't even agree on which song sounds like the Strokes means that the Strokes don't really have a unified, defined sound. You know, it's like there's a lot of things, a lot of different sounds from them. And I hear different people say, oh, this song sounds like the Strokes. This song sounds like the Strokes. This song doesn't sound like the Strokes. And it's a different song every single time that they talk about that. No one can really agree to which one sounds like the original Strokes, but they still want to compare it to This Is It.
down to a single line with him saying, "The worse reality gets, the less you want to hear about it." It's a track that is very much about escapism, but then also having these feelings of isolation that are felt after running away from all the madness and chaos of the world and people. The issue, though, that I and many had with this track upon its release is that it is just absolutely slathered in autotune, like an abusive amount of it. And look, in the greater context of The Strokes and Julian's music career, he is no stranger to autotune.
The only song I don't like the autotune in is Psycho Shit. I don't think the autotune is that bad in Going Shopping. Anyway,
Or some pitch correction. He has used it many a time, sometimes quite successfully, like on Instant Crush with Daft Punk, or the various vocal manipulations and effects that you can hear on the 2011 Strokes album Angles, which I would argue is kind of like one of the selling points of the album. And while this sort of thing doesn't always lead to a perfect result for Julian and the band, at the very least when they head in this direction, it feels purposeful, intentional, daring, a little bit different. However, I can't say the same for Going Shopping, which features some solid writing for sure, but at its core, it feels kind of like an average Strokes song, more or less. But then it's just randomly topped with autotune, like Rick and the band decided to set it and forget it, ignoring all of the notes that get thrown in that sound out of place or out of key as Julian is kind of loosely veering from note to note. A characteristic about his delivery that's actually pretty cool and charming when you were hearing his vocal performances in the raw, but that characteristic is lost when the auto-tune is applied in a way that makes Julian's singing sound more rigid or melodically locked into a grid, which is a shame because, again, at its core, I don't think this is a bad track at all. Of course, the Strokes going this direction left fans wondering how much auto-tune might end up being on this album, and that question was pretty much answered by the second single on the record, Falling Out of Love, which is a ballad, a pretty emotional one at that, one with very slow, dreamy guitars, numerous falsetto runs from Julian too. Overall, it's a very gentle and nuanced sound from the band, one that could most definitely use a vocal that's maybe soft or pillowy or sweet and intimate. Nope. Sorry, you're gonna get hot, spicy shots of auto-tune right in your ear instead. It's like sonic pepper spray over prom night chord progressions. Even the damn spoken word passages on the song are auto-tuned. After this track,
Boo hoo. He's using autotune. Whatever. It's really not that bad. It's really not bad. It can be harsh at some points, but it's not bad overall.
I think most had kind of like accepted their fate with this record, like this was going to be the Strokes auto-tune album. And by that, I don't mean the band would only be using auto-tune for every track, because in fact, they actually aren't. What I mean by that is auto-tune would be the only defining element of the record that would make it feel novel or interesting with respect to every other Strokes project. Because it's not like the band and Julian Casablancas haven't made experimental music before. They most certainly have, and there are probably contexts in which auto-tune within the band would make sense or even be called for. But that is not the instrumental palette of this record. Much of the time, a lot of the production on this album and the guitar work, the drums, are pretty average for the Strokes, and really would
Pretty average for the Strokes. Dude, not him saying that the only like experimental aspect of this is the autotune. It's not the songwriting, the song structure, the the riffs, like almost everything about it is experimental, not just the autotune. Like what song is it? Is it the fucking Liar's Remorse, the instrumental break? That has like a really weird little solo. I can't even pinpoint what instrument that's supposed to be. But yeah, like you can't really say that the autotune's the only thing that's experimental. You can't say that this is a Strokes album with autotune put on it. That's not what it is. None of these songs sound anything like Is This It? The only one that sounds like Is This It would be Going Shopping. That's the only song on here that's like the Strokes but with autotune. If you want to have a stroke sound, that'd be it. You know, and even then, like some of the composition in Going Shopping doesn't even remotely resemble what the Strokes were doing in their first album. So yeah, I don't really agree that autotune is the only thing that's different about this album.
would be unremarkable if not for Julian topping them with this auto-tune. And just
Julian topping them? Crazy, bro. Anyway, let me rewind a little bit.
on this album, and the guitar work, the drums, are pretty average for the Strokes, and really would be unremarkable if not for Julian topping them with this auto-tune. And just pushing it so hard to the point where he sounds like a pitch-corrected alien. So yeah, again, worst fears were pretty much confirmed with the release of the album, and I don't just mean its use of vocal effects, but also its overall lack of inspiration, because it doesn't feel like the band has any new or refreshing ideas in the tank at this point. point, and what decent songs are here are, again, just slathered in the autotune. Take the song Psycho Shit, for example, which is a very dramatic and dynamic start to the record. Love the chord progression, love the progressive intensity of it. I also love Albert's lead guitar work in the last leg of the song, too. But of course, the autotune.
See, I think I think Psycho Shit is the most dynamically progressive song the Strokes have ever written. Like the way the song builds up, it's like a slow burn, but it slowly gets more chaotic. The dynamics just swell throughout the song. Like I don't like that song, but I can commend it for what it does right. Um, but yeah, I mean, the Strokes have never done anything like that, in my opinion. Let's move on.
Is there, and it does not lend itself to the very theatrical performance Julian is trying to give. And it doesn't really work with the deep vibrato he's trying to sing with that pulls him in and out of the note. The autotune doesn't really know where he wants to be. It's especially frustrating because behind the autotune, you can hear the performance Julian is giving is actually not that bad at all. And it just makes me wonder what this plugin is supposed to be bringing to the table on this track. Personally, I would argue it's bringing nothing or rather taking away from the song. But on the following Dine and Dash, the
I do agree that the vocals are the worst part about that song. Um, and I think the comment of him saying like, "What does the vocal plugin bring?" You think the autotune critique is mostly a meme? I mean, it's a I don't know. I feel like people are serious about them not liking the autotune, and I think a lot of people don't really think for themselves. Um, so like they're gonna hear him say shit and they're just gonna fucking repeat it back, you know. Um, but I lost my train of thought. Yeah, the comment of him saying that the vocal plugin doesn't bring anything to the table. Like, I disagree. Um, Julian once said that he sees the vocals of a song as another instrument. Um, so in the way this manifested in the earlier records and a lot of, maybe not his solo work, but definitely in the first Voids album, is that his voice in terms of volume and mixing, it blended with the other instruments in the mix, you know. That's why there's a lot of instances where you can't really make out what he's saying because he's trying to make his voice blend in with the other instruments. And I think this is another step in that direction of him wanting to make his voice seem like an instrument by giving it a unique color. Um, and you know, in some instances, you want all the instruments to blend, and I think in this instance, you want this instrument to come out. You know, it's just the texture. It's the same concept of the voice as an instrument, but we're changing the texture that where that instrument is at. He now wants the instrument to stick out of the texture. Um, I think it does bring something to the table. You just don't like what he's feeding you, you know. Anyway, let's move on.
Autotune is off. In fact, the instrumentation and writing on this track kind of takes me back to the new Abnormal era. There's a lot of familiar strokesisms on this track, but coming across kind of grim or dark. You have droning synth layers on this track, guitar work that has almost like a goth flavor to it, and Julian switching off between these kind of standoffish croons.
The lyrics, to be honest, could be him trolling, not gonna lie. Yeah, he does have like a really weird attitude in this album about it's like a very what's the word? There's a word I'm looking for. I can't think of the word, but it's a very playful, very kind of like kind of like self-centered, not really self-centered, but there's a lot of commentary on this album about the way his music is perceived and what he's trying to achieve. And there's even an interview between Anthony Fantano and Julian Casablancas where he they kind of butt heads a little bit, but not really, uh, about there's like a moment that stuck out to me. I don't remember what the words were exactly, but there's like he mentions that he has one specific vision that he wants to follow, or like there's a certain thing he wants to do. I'd have to find the moment. Um, like he doesn't like that his albums are always compared to the first one. He wants each album to stand on its own, you know. It kind of like that vibe, I think is what he was getting at. Um I don't know. I can't really remember right now, but I'm gonna keep playing this video.
And gruff screams. I mean, it's great for this album, but I'm not even sure this would be like a top 3 track on New Abnormal, or a top 5 for that matter. Then there's Lonely in the Future, another moment that at its core feels like a standard stroke song of sorts, with groovy.
And in what way does this song sound like a stroke song, dude? Like I don't hear it. Lonely in the Future does not sound like a stroke song to me in any way, shape, or form. Or a quote unquote stroke song, because I don't think there's a unified stroke sound.
Rock beats, sleek rhythm guitars, Julian's trademark brand of baritone swagger, kind of sounding like an indie lounge singer. But once again, you have the autotune, which I would argue in the case of this song doesn't entirely ruin it. It's kind of like a straightforward indie pop rock cut where Julian's not trying to do too much dramatically, too much vibrato. The performance is pretty straightforward, which I think plays into the effect. A bigger issue is kind of the lyrics feeling almost like a bit of a lost opportunity, which the bulk of the song is devoted to this idea that he's kind of like ahead of the curve culturally in various ways and lists off a handful of different figures that he's kind of like beat to the punch. But this in itself is kind of a weird argument to be making on this record because, again, did you not just do like an AI art album cover on that last Voids record? Was that being ahead of the curve? And also, again, the only
I think that's like besides the point. You actually do feel Strokesy vibe on that song. Should I just play it on stream to see like what I let me play the song on stream. Hold on. Let's play it because I don't. I'll have some headphones on. But him saying that he's like ahead of the curve and that he's ahead of his time. The like, oh my gosh, that has nothing to do with him using AI. I don't know. That's a really weird dunk, I guess. Let me see. Let me play. Let me play. Lonely in the Future. Okay. So the way the guitars are written, uh, before the super duper banger, yeah. That opening riff doesn't sound like the Strokes, but the way the guitars are written during the verses and choruses at the beginning, that's like that's classic Strokes composition, you know. But their tone isn't really giving the Strokes. The vocal performance isn't really giving the Strokes. I mean, yeah, I can see the comparison there in the guitars at least. But yes, let's move on.
Novel thing about this
Well, yeah, yeah. So him being ahead of the curve and being ahead of the time, it's like he revived rock with "Is This It?" You know, and it's like Albert said when Room on Fire came out, there were so many complaints about it, but now everybody wants that sound. So that, you know, in a way, that album was ahead of its time because it wasn't appreciated during its time, but it's appreciated now. Um, and the same goes with every single fucking album afterwards. Like every single time an album comes out, I there's complaints about it not sounding like Is This It, and then later on, it's someone's favorite album. It's multiple people's favorite album. It's kind of like the prequels, you know, the Star Wars prequels. Everybody fucking hated them when they came out, but now they're like loved by so many. But yeah, let's move on.
new album here is that it's slathered in an effect that is older than the band itself and had like its big
He and he just talks shit once again of him not being ahead of the curve, ahead of his time because he's using autotune. Okay, whatever. He's using it in a way that I've never heard anyone else use it before. Um, yeah, I don't know. He's kind of just bullshitting right now.
mainstream introduction back in 1998 or so. So like what's ahead
Yeah, guitars existed back then. You're not ahead of your time. Yeah, guitars existed before you started using them. You're not ahead of your time, bro. All right.
of the curve about that? Still, even so, Julian makes the argument that he didn't want to do X or Y or Z yesterday, but he did. And interestingly,
Yeah, he didn't want to fucking keep making music like like Is This It or Room on Fire, but y'all keep fucking begging him to.
I am also named among the many figures who he heard this or that before, did this or that before. With Julian saying that, yes, he heard stuff 20 years ago when he was a kid, when he was 27.
When playing games on PC, do you ever wonder if someone had a clip with you in it?
Download Metal, then go to Albums, Clips
No
are in,
one's ever
and connect to any
wondered.
games you want clips for.
Just kidding.
And there you are.
Here's one I found of myself.
I'm gonna clutch up.
I've been in
Yes,
some
the
groups.
tender childhood age of 27. But yeah, saying you were onto music or musical ideas before someone who you're almost 10 years older than is not like really a flex. I'm sure right now there's 15-year-olds forming music opinions that I might have had around that age. It doesn't mean they don't have valid perspectives or can't recognize art. But as silly as this commentary is, I'm more offended by the bridge of this track because what the fuck are these synthesizers? They sound like ass. They
Those synthesizers are fucking glorious. This guy's stupid.
sound like they were EQ'd on an ass, or a Bluetooth speaker that was lodged in an ass. And just when I thought I was done with this song, I get some deja vu on Going to Babylon, which, why does this feel like I'm listening to a chord progression similar to that of Lonely in the Future again? I swear, there are parts of this track where you could sing Julian's chorus over it, but just slower and it works. But now he's singing the track
They don't have the same chord progression, by the way. Anyway,
with no auto-tune and doing what sounds like a Jamiroquai impression. I mean, at least the vocals are raw and sound pretty good, but it's kind of like the band went into the studio with a limited amount of tunes and just decided to do a slower and more vaguely sexy version of the same musical
if they
idea,
did,
and
would that
then
be a
just
bad
put like
thing?
different lyrics on it. But then as we move into the final leg of the album, we have Liar's Remorse, which, judging from the chords and melodies on this track, this is kind of like the Strokes' Hotel California, or maybe it's their I Will Survive, or maybe it's both but worse. Whatever it's borrowing from, it does have a pretty compelling.
See the way he keeps trying to force it into a box, but he can't. He can't force it into a box, but he's trying. He's trying to force it into a box. Jesus Christ.
A set of chords to it and a vocal melody. But like many tracks off that last Voids album, even if there are decent bones there and good intentions, none of it ever really develops or builds up into anything that is like a payoff of any sort to all this tension that's being built up. I mean, maybe it would be a bit more worth it if we were being given some sonic experiments on the level of an Angles, or even like, you know, the Void's Human Sadness. Then with the Fruits of Conquest, we are suddenly getting funky with hip shaking guitars and even hand drums. And these are elements I could see myself enjoying in another context. In fact, I know that's true because in a lot of ways, this track just sounds like a cake song. A cake song where the
Once again, putting it into a box. everything needs to fit into a box. Everything needs to sound like something, and I need to find out what it sounds like.
vocals and lyrics are severely phoned in. Again, love that the Strokes and their fans are pitching this record as, you know, the band zigging when everyone thought they would zag, when they're literally just making cake sounding pop rock, with Julian goofing off on the bridge singing, I'm a leech, I'm a leech, I'm a leech. The closing track, Tyrants of the Mellow Moon, is yet another slow burner with way too damn much auto-tune on it, I am sorry. Like the intro track, it has a lot of nuance to it, dramatic chords, slow progression, but Julian's vocals just sound like trash. There are some elements of its writing, especially toward the very end, that feels almost like a reprise or a callback to some musical motifs from earlier on the album, especially at the start. That is a well-intentioned idea, but I think that would have gone over better on an album that, again, didn't feel so messy and thrown together and so haphazard in its structuring, in its mixing, in its use of effects. But yeah, this album kind of stinks, and I think it's the Strokes' worst album yet, far worse than Come Down Machine. In fact, it makes Come Down Machine sound great. I'm actually sort of nostalgic for Come Down Machine after listening to this record, but as strongly as I feel about this album in the way that I do, and feeling this way as a longtime Strokes fan, somebody who's been fucking with the band's music since their debut album, I'm sad and a little
Fucking with their music since their debut album, but you fucking hate Calm Down Machine. You fucking hate First Impressions. You just want them to make Is This It again. Oh, and he also fucking hates Angles.
worried that Julian's decision to mention me in the lyrics of this record will leave a lot of desperate losers feeling like, oh, well, he just doesn't like the album because he was mentioned, then he would have liked it if he wasn't. When honestly, this record is not that far of a cry away in quality to that Void's album that I smashed to bits in a review. Like, this over here is a little bit better, but honestly, not by much. It really does feel like on some level Julian was trying to poison the well here and make it seem like no matter what I say about this record, his comments about me are going to be impacting this review. When in reality, prior to the release of this record, we have a very similar sounding example that I said sucked, and then following that, we have another similar sounding album that sucks a bit less, but still sucks all the same, which is why I'm feeling a decent to strong 3 on this one. Transition, have you
3. I'd give this like an 8, maybe 8 out of 10. The autotune, that's all they talk about in the comments. Giving it a 3 and still having the vinyl in the shelf is devil work. Does he have? Oh, he does have it. I mean, I don't see what the issue is there. His name in the album, how could he not? He's an 8 album, yeah. Joking aside, he supports physical media, even if he's on an album, even if it's not an album he likes. Buying it still means supporting the group, and now he has the music forever. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about this review. I mean, I'll give my review, I guess. Also, what is this fucking ad? Block. There's been some crazy ass ads on here. Um, I remember I was putting a YouTube video for my students, and one of the ads here was like a fucking a gay test or something. I'm like, bruh. And one of the kids saw it. Oh no, it was like a rainbow test, but it was clearly like a gay test. But anyway, um, yeah, I mean, I'd give this album an 8. I don't know, like I really like that he's experimenting with with in general with a lot of things, the song structure, the the timbre of his voice, the timbre of the instruments he's using. Um, Also, the fact that I blocked the ad and it's still there, the hell. Um, there's just I wish he would have not made as many commentaries about the state of his music and stuck to making music that he wants to make, and not because he feels like he needs to say something about um what people are saying about him, I guess, if that makes any sense. But the psycho shit, I don't really like psycho shit or liar's remorse, to be honest. Dine and Dash is really good. Lonely in the Future is a fucking mega banger. I think Falling Out of Love is top 10, top 10 stroke songs, if I'm being honest. And I really love Going to Babylon. I think actually, hmm, I think Going to Babylon is my favorite track on the album. I really like Going Shopping. Fruits of Conquest is really good. Tyrants of the Mellow Moon is not the swan song I wanted from the Strokes, but it's also a good swan song if it's intended to be one. Um, yeah, that's really all I can say about this matter.